Many people out there have been speculating on that Meghan Markle has lied about her age. Is she actually older?
Listen, people always say age is just a number. But for Meghan Markle, that number might be one of her biggest mysteries, because royal biographer Tom Bower has exposed something that flips her entire story on its head, suggesting her timeline might have started years earlier than the world was led to believe.
They want to hide their secrets, and I just love digging away to find out what they don't want us to know.
Meghan has turned reinvention into her greatest performance. She's worn every title flawlessly: the Hollywood darling, the royal rule breaker, the global humanitarian, and the self-made woman who rose from the ground up. But the twist no one ever saw coming: the biggest role she may have ever played isn't on screen or in the palace, it's the age she claims to be.
This is a copy of 17 magazine. It was published in March of 1997. In it, it mentions our Megzy from Los Angeles and that she was 21 years old at the time of publication. That would make her birth year at around 1976.
It all began with an old, forgotten issue of 17 magazine from 1997, a faded relic featuring a young, bright-eyed Meghan Markle listed as 21 years old. And if we run the numbers, that would make her close to 50 by 2025, not 44, and definitely not the forever 30-something image the world's been sold.
How can you get your age so wrong?
That small change in numbers flips her entire story. Everything from her earliest auditions to the timeline of her royal rise suddenly looks different. But here's where things get even crazier. Meghan's own father has said her childhood memories never matched the version she shared with the world. Behind the scenes, insiders claim she trimmed a few years off to fit Hollywood's age standards. And the palace, silent. Because once you start pulling at the threads of Meghan's timeline, every photo, every achievement, every perfectly practiced smile starts to feel a little too staged.
This gentleman right here, that's Nick Jones, the original founder of Soho House. Guess where he's going there? He's arriving at Meghan Markle and Harry's wedding as guest of honor. Oh yeah, Soho was present there.
Get ready, because in the next few minutes, we're uncovering what might be the most dramatic royal rewrite since The Crown. This isn't rumor chasing, it's a timeline mystery that plays out like a crime scene. And by the time we're done, one question will stick in your mind. If Meghan Markle's age isn't what we've been told, then what else in her story has been rewritten? So what do you think? Did Meghan craft her own timeline, or is this just another case of the media spinning the narrative? Let me know your take in the comments.
And you're wondering, why does her age matter at all? Because her age would also have an impact on her ability to have children. Because if Meghan Markle is 4 years older than what we have been led to believe, it makes it even more difficult to believe that she was able to get pregnant so quickly.
Every mystery has its clue that gives everything away. And for Meghan Markle, it wasn't a palace leak or some secret memo. It was a glossy page pulled straight from a 1997 teen magazine. Hidden inside that 17 issue was a photo of a young Meghan flashing that unmistakable smile, introduced as a 21-year-old student from Los Angeles. Seems innocent enough, right? Until you realize that in 1997, she should have been just 16. That single printed detail sent the internet into overdrive. Reddit threads exploded, royal fans started doing the math, and even Tom Bower pointed out that the numbers didn't add up, but the story did.
And that ridiculous story about how they first met. The whole thing was a tissue of inaccuracies, to be polite.
If that magazine got it right, Meghan wasn't born in 1981 at all, but somewhere closer to 1975 or 1976, which would mean that when she started chasing her first acting gigs, she wasn't a newcomer in her early 20s. She was already stepping into her 30s. And in Hollywood, age isn't just a number, it's the price of opportunity. Every extra year can cost you a role, close a door, or shift your label from rising star to past her moment. So according to the whispers, Meghan's team didn't lie. They simply rewrote the timeline. A little creative editing to keep the story young and ambitious. What's strange is that 17 magazine never retracted the piece, it just disappeared. Copies vanished from digital archives, and no one from the publication ever said a word. Almost as if someone wanted that tiny detail erased before royal eyes ever saw it. But here's where things really start to fall apart. Her father, Thomas Markle, insists he remembers her being in her 20s long before that issue was printed. And if he's right, then this isn't just a story that stretches the truth, it shatters it.
Her father claims that she was born in 1981. So if she was born in 1981 when Yasmin did that commercial, and like in 1997, she would have been 16 years of age, not 13.
Meghan was born August 4th, 40 years ago.
Now, if that 17 magazine detail really turns out to be true, it raises a bigger question. What else could Meghan be hiding from her royal story? Some say that article just scratched the surface, but her father's words, they crack something much deeper. Thomas Markle wasn't just her parent, he was there for every chapter of her early life. And the timeline he remembers doesn't line up with the polished version printed by the palace. In past interviews, Thomas has made claims that even seasoned royal journalists couldn't ignore. He recalls Meghan working full-time when she supposedly should have still been in school, celebrating birthdays and milestones that never matched her official age. And when he saw her official birth year repeated across royal biographies, he reportedly just shook his head and said, "That's not the Meghan I knew."
So there is something that is not connecting. There is something that is not right.
Let's be honest. Thomas Markle has never been the palace's favorite topic, but even those who doubt him can't ignore the evidence he's holding. Old snapshots, school paperwork, and job records quietly suggest that Meghan may have lived a few extra years before stepping into the spotlight as that bright, ambitious newcomer chasing her Hollywood dream. And just when you think the story can't twist any further, it does.
Never mind the hysterectomy stories that her family have told. But that would make it more difficult because that would make Meghan Markle near 50.
Several people from Meghan's old Los Angeles neighborhood have shared eerily similar memories. One former neighbor even told a tabloid, "She was always older than she claimed, but no one cared, she was driven." That single line, "she was always older than she claimed," lit the match for what the internet now calls Agegate. Because when both her father and former neighbors suggest her timeline doesn't add up, you start to wonder what else in her royal story might have been edited for presentation. One thing's clear, it's not just the math that's off. Even her past seems to have lost its sense of direction. And if that sounds wild, just wait, because Hollywood played a much bigger role than anyone realized. Before Meghan became royalty, her real power wasn't charm, it was reinvention. She convinced Hollywood she was the next fresh face, when according to insiders, she was already celebrating her 30th birthday.
She claims that she was 13 years of age when she started to work for Humphrey Yogurt, in spite of the fact that Humphrey Yogurt has said that they have never employed anybody aged 13.
When I was just 11 years old, I unknowingly and somehow accidentally became a female advocate. A pivotal moment reshaped my notion of what is possible.
Let's be honest, in Hollywood, age is more than a number, it's ammunition. Careers don't end from bad performances, they fade because of bad birth dates. Women in their 20s are celebrated as the next big thing, while those in their 30s are told to step behind the camera. So when Meghan's resume suddenly appeared a few years younger, insiders say that wasn't coincidence, it was calculation. She understood exactly how the industry worked. Casting directors crave the thrill of discovering new talent, and Meghan knew how to sell that illusion flawlessly, smiling, composed, and acting like she was just breaking in, when in truth, she'd already been hustling for nearly a decade.
Jeffrey Epstein was also Harvey Weinstein, very prominent. There were members. Meghan Markle was just one of the working girls for Soho House. Call girl, working girl, escort, whatever you want to call it. That's what she was.
When Suits finally made Meghan famous, she wasn't some fresh graduate chasing a dream. She was a seasoned actress finally getting her moment. But here's where things start to get interesting. Old talent bios and casting profiles once showed different ages. Then suddenly, just before her royal romance became public, they vanished. Updated or removed completely. Maybe coincidence, or maybe a well-timed cleanup of numbers that didn't fit the story. Because by the time she walked down that aisle, the world wasn't watching a 40-something actress, they were falling for a 30-something Cinderella. Meghan didn't just play the Hollywood game, she mastered it, then carried that same playbook right into Buckingham Palace. But when showbiz meets the crown, the truth always finds a way through the cracks. And in Meghan's case, those cracks are only getting wider. When she stepped into royal life, everyone assumed Hollywood was behind her. But the truth is, she brought every PR trick with her. And soon, even the palace couldn't tell what was real and what was retouched for the cameras.
I mean, everybody has seen that commercial. It clearly starts with, when I'm Meghan Markle, I'm 12 years old. So what is going on here? Why the secrecy around this woman's birth certificate? Why the mistakes in age that are so blatant for others?
Here's where things get even stranger. Researchers who looked into Meghan's early charity work, acting records, and even old college notes found timeline gaps big enough to fit a royal carriage through. Some of her listed events supposedly happened when she was 22, yet the paperwork connected to them was dated 6 years earlier. It's like piecing together a puzzle where half the images have been edited. Tom Bower didn't hold back either. He called Meghan's official story a polished production with missing scenes, a script that someone's clearly been rewriting, and not with Buckingham's approval. But the palace's biggest weakness? The internet. Every deleted record, every edited profile, every vanished file still leaves a digital trail. And royal watchers have traced every single one of them straight back to Meghan's PR circle. Because behind the palace walls, this wasn't just a romance. It was a rollout. When royal tradition meets Hollywood editing, what you get isn't transparency. It's a fairy tale wearing designer labels. But stay tuned, because what comes next takes this story from rewritten timelines to something far deeper. And compared to that, the age rumors look like child's play.
What if Meghan Markle was adopted? What if there more to her birth than just her age? Could it be that she doesn't know her own age because she's been lied to by her father and mother? Could it be that's why Doria doesn't have a bond with Meghan Markle? Because what mother leaves her daughter when she's 3 or 4 years?
In every royal love story, there's supposed to be that perfect ending. And for Meghan, it came with the arrival of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, the baby who completed her picture of a royal happily ever after. But the story of Archie's birth reads less like a hospital record and more like a scene written by a Hollywood PR team. According to the palace, everything went flawlessly. Serene mother, proud father, discreet hospital, no drama. Yet behind the royal curtains, Tom Bower and a few hospital insiders whispered a very different version, one that sounded straight out of a political drama. They questioned how Meghan could have had 2 epidurals, an unusually quick labor, and a same-day exit from a high-security ward that typically keeps new mothers for at least 48 hours. One nurse even joked that the timeline moved faster than a royal motorcade. Then came the photos. Meghan, radiant in heels, smiling on the palace steps just 2 days later. Fans called it miraculous. Skeptics called it suspicious, because when every second of your motherhood feels choreographed for the camera, people start asking who's behind the script. And the questions didn't stop there. From the missing birth certificate details to vanishing medical records and odd travel reports, every royal no comment only made things louder. If this was truly the happiest royal moment in years, why guard it like state secrets? Maybe it wasn't about privacy. Maybe it was about control. Control over the story, the image, and yes, the timeline that connected it all. Because when the facts don't fit, Meghan doesn't rewrite reality, she rewrites the story. And once again, she proved she's the best in the business at doing exactly that.
Absolute media manipulation. But I thought tonight this was really ridiculous.
He describes her very well, and he does this by taking a look. People think her kids are fake. They think they're AI.
But think about it. If even her motherhood timeline doesn't quite add up, what does that say about the empire she's built since? By the time Meghan crossed the Atlantic, she wasn't just marrying a prince, she was marrying potential. From the moment that engagement ring caught the spotlight, her Hollywood instincts switched back on. This wasn't about crowns and castles, it was about branding. Take a closer look and a clear pattern appears. One week, she's the misunderstood outsider taking on the British elite. The next, she's the fearless activist reshaping modern royalty. Every outfit, every interview, every candid appearance felt like part of a larger rollout, straight out of a Beverly Hills PR playbook. Insiders even have a name for it, the Markle method. Turn every headline, good or bad, into a storyline. Criticism becomes bravery, mistakes turn into lessons, and silence transforms into sympathy. And when public opinion dips, cue the charity photo op or a perfectly timed podcast drop. Even the Oprah interview didn't feel like confession, it felt like content. The lighting, the tone, the pauses, nothing was left to chance. Meghan wasn't opening up, she was reintroducing herself. She dropped her royal title the way a company retires an old logo. Out went the palace, and in came the production deals, the podcasts, the Netflix specials. Each project another move in the rebranding of Meghan 2.0. But here's the twist. The more she polished the image, the more cracks began to show. The internet wasn't buying the perfection. It smelled spin. Because when everything looks staged, authenticity disappears. Meghan didn't walk away from the monarchy. She turned it into a business. The Duchess became the brand. And the product was herself.
London since 2013, hunting for a man to marry. She arrived in London, full career, single girl, wasn't interested. Of course, she'd been coming to London, an Englishman. She was on a man hunt.
When you build an empire on image control, there's one truth that always catches up. Eventually, the mask starts to slip. And when the dust settles on Meghan Markle's carefully crafted timeline, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The palace didn't silence her story. She directed it. So ask yourself, is Meghan a PR mastermind rewriting her destiny, or the most skilled royal manipulator of our time? Because every missing year, every edited headline, every conveniently adjusted fact points to the same pattern. Meghan wasn't living a royal romance, she was producing one. And like any high-budget production, it came with retakes, rewrites, and a final cut designed to keep her on top. The palace stayed quiet. The media couldn't agree. The audience still hooked. Even with all the contradictions, she remains the most talked about woman to ever step out of Windsor Castle. But silence doesn't mean truth. It only means the next scene hasn't been filmed yet. And if even part of Tom Bower's claims are real, then what looks like a royal love story might actually be a script that's still being written. Every mystery starts somewhere, and in Meghan's case, the trail doesn't begin in Hollywood or at the palace gates, it starts at home. Long before the royal titles and Netflix cameras, there was a quiet tension running through the Markle family that most people never noticed. Her mother, Doria Ragland, remains a shadowy figure in Meghan's story, present, polished, but rarely quoted. Few realize that Doria's own timeline is filled with long absences, jobs that appeared and disappeared, and periods where even local records don't quite align. The Markle side isn't any clearer. Her father, Thomas, has shown pictures, tax forms, and school records that point to different dates than the ones officially listed. But perhaps the most curious voice is Meghan's half-sister, Samantha, who's claimed for years that Meghan's public image doesn't resemble the woman she grew up with. Neighbors from their old Los Angeles block remember a young Meghan, polite but ambitious, already working part-time long before her teenage years were supposed to end. Yet in royal biographies, those same years are painted as innocent and academic. Some researchers even notice that certain family photos have inconsistent timestamps, digital metadata suggesting edits years after they were supposedly taken. None of this is proof, but together it paints a pattern of quiet correction. The Markle family doesn't just argue over attention, they argue over history itself. What makes this even more complicated is how efficiently those family voices were muted once Meghan stepped into royal life. Invitations stopped, calls went unanswered, and by the time wedding bells rang at Windsor, half of her relatives were learning about it from tabloids, not from her. It's as if a new version of the Markle family was drafted overnight, one where inconvenient characters were written out of the script. And yet those who've spoken publicly all repeat the same sentiment. The woman they knew back then wasn't a villain, but she wasn't the fairy tale either. That contrast between the daughter remembered and the Duchess presented adds another layer to her mystery. Because if timelines can bend, so can family trees. And maybe, just maybe, the truth about Meghan's past isn't hidden in palace files or press releases. It's buried in the memories of the people who knew her before the cameras ever rolled. When Meghan and Harry stepped away from royal life, the headlines focused on freedom, not forecasting. But behind the curtain, a different plan was unfolding. One less about escape and more about expansion. Meghan didn't abandon the crown, she traded it for a company portfolio. Within months, domains were registered, legal teams assembled, and new trademarks quietly filed across multiple industries. Lifestyle brands, media ventures, and philanthropic fronts began to appear, each one blending royalty with commerce. It wasn't rebellion, it was a rebrand. Her post-royal image wasn't built overnight. It followed the same rhythm as a product launch: controlled leaks, calculated silence, and perfectly timed reveals. While tabloids wrote about Megxit, marketing strategists noticed something else: the precision of a woman who knew her market. The podcast deals, Netflix productions, and her upcoming lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, weren't just creative outlets. They were chapters of a global rollout, designed to keep her name profitable even as public opinion fractured. The royal title gave her status. Hollywood taught her how to sell it. Insiders describe her strategy as prestige PR meets Silicon Valley. Instead of waiting for royal invitations, she built her own empire of influence, one that runs on algorithms, not aristocracy. Each appearance, each collaboration, each speech was crafted to shift her image from duchess to digital mogul. And while critics mocked the brand's inconsistency, the truth is that's part of its genius: adaptability disguised as authenticity. Yet the deeper you look, the blurrier it gets. Some of those business filings linked to shell companies with unclear ownership. PR insiders claim the couple's network of consultants rivals that of a small studio. Even her charity ventures seem to double as brand positioning. It's no longer about telling her story, it's about owning every version of it. And the result is an empire built not on royalty or film, but on something far stronger: narrative control. Because for Meghan, the crown was never the prize. The spotlight was. In the end, Meghan Markle's story isn't just about age, fame, or even royalty, it's about authorship. Every headline, every carefully posed photo, every moment of silence feels like part of a bigger manuscript only she controls. Her rise from Hollywood to Windsor and back again wasn't an accident. It was a study in image design. Each contradiction, from timelines to family ties to corporate ventures, forms the backbone of a narrative that's still being written. The deeper we look, the more the lines blur between truth and production. The palace played its part, the media played theirs, but Meghan, she wrote the script and cast herself as both protagonist and producer. Whether you see it as manipulation or mastery depends on which version of her story you choose to believe. Because behind the royal etiquette, the PR gloss, and the polished compassion lies a woman who understood something most people never do: control the story, and you control the legacy. Maybe that's why every time her past resurfaces, it doesn't destroy her, it just reinvents her. Meghan Markle's greatest creation might not be her career, her marriage, or her title. It might be Meghan Markle herself.